I was just sat thinking, I wonder which ETF is the most popular in the world amongst investors. Because surely the most popular one will be the best one. Or at least we can assume that, but let's find out. So just as anyone would these days, I took to Google. A quick Google search usually does the trick. The first thing I came across was this article by Morningstar. It's a tad outdated as it's from December 19, but it's a good starting place. Straight away, this list shows me that Vanguard is dominating in the most popular ETFs, with 6 out of 10 on this list being Vanguard ones. I then looked at some other sources. I went to my cupboard, I found the ketchup, I found the mayonnaise, I asked for their opinions, and this is then what I found. I came across Barclays, which is a big British bank, and they release a list of the most popular ETFs on a weekly basis. And to do this, they use the number of purchases and the number of sales across different ETFs, and they see which one is the most popular. This list is the top 10 purchases between the 28th of January and the 3rd of February. Of course, this is a little bit narrow-sighted as the time span is only across 1 week, and it's only looking at investors that use Barclays, which of course will be mainly UK investors. But even so, we can see from this list that the most popular ETF that they've reported is the S&P 500, specifically the Vanguard S&P 500. But let's just compare the two lists that we found so far. What we see is that the S&P 500 and the QQQ feature as the most popular ETFs on both of these lists. Clearly, tracking the S&P 500 and the NASDAQ are really popular choices amongst investors. Freetrade also do a similar thing to Barclays in the sense that they track the most popular ETFs over the last 1 week period. And over the last 1 week on Freetrade, a similar picture was painted. And on this website here that looks at ETF Trends, a similar thing is shown again. So basically, after all my research and looking at various different sources, there was a common theme. The most popular ETFs seem to be those that track the S&P 500 and the QQQ. Depending on whether I was looking at a UK or a US based source, I also saw the FTSE 100 and the VTI appear a few times. The VTI, for those who don't know, is a total US market tracker. So overall, Vanguard seems to be a very popular option amongst ETFs. And this is no surprise, seeing as of 2021, Vanguard had more than $7.5 trillion in assets under their management, which is an insane amount and is a lot higher than a lot of other platforms and brokerages out there. And this is because lots and lots of platforms out there allow their investors to invest into Vanguard funds. We also saw Invesco and iShares, which is owned by BlackRock, appear on these lists quite commonly as well. Which is no surprise again because these guys are massive players. Okay, so now we know the most popular ETFs seem to be the S&P 500 and the QQQ. So what are the differences between these and which one is the best? Firstly, the most common ETF that is tracking the QQQ is from a company called Invesco. QQQ from Invesco, which we saw featured on these lists, tracks the NASDAQ 100 index. SPY, VOO and VUSA are all ticker symbols for ETFs that track the S&P 500. The S&P 500 is a stock market index tracking the performance of the largest 500 companies listed on US stock exchanges. These are large cap companies, so think of those companies with massive market capitalization. Just to give you an idea of some of the companies that feature, think Apple, Microsoft, Tesla, Nvidia, all these massive US companies. The NASDAQ 100 index, on the other hand, is a collection of the largest, most actively traded companies featured on the NASDAQ stock exchange. Companies that feature in the NASDAQ 100 are the likes of Apple, Microsoft, Tesla, Adobe, and so on. One thing to note about the QQQ ETF, which is tracking those companies in the NASDAQ 100, is that it's really concentrated towards the technology sector. Whereas SPY, for example, tracking the S&P 500, is tracking a collection of the 500 largest companies in the US across many sectors. So the S&P 500 really does tick the box in terms of diversification as compared to the NASDAQ 100. But it really depends on what you want as an investor, because over the last few years, the growth has been seen in these big technology companies. But there will be crossover between the two. For example, Apple are the top position by weighting in both the NASDAQ and the S&P. When it comes to the performance, the NASDAQ has been outperforming the S&P 500. Over the last 15 years, the compound annual growth rate of the NASDAQ has sat at about 16%. Whereas it's been 8% with the S&P 500. And this is probably due to the big growth seen in the tech sector. But past performance doesn't always indicate future performance, as I'm sure you already know. And the lack of diversification in terms of sectors seen in the NASDAQ 100 may put some investors off. So the S&P 500 and the NASDAQ 100, these are the most popular ETFs. And I think for good reason. They both have their advantages and they both have their disadvantages. But I'm going to open the final conclusion up to you guys. I have a question for you. Let me know in the comments below if you could only invest in one of these ETFs, either one tracking the S&P 500 or one tracking the NASDAQ 100, which one would you pick and why? And if you're wondering how I invest, then check out my latest portfolio update that I'll pop here.